This is going to be our final speaker of the night, and we have been waiting for over a year for her to come out and be part of Who Knew. Tom Truitt has asked her every single time. It's been the first time her schedule has permitted. She is out spreading country music globally. You'll see in her presentation how busy she is and some of the exclusive company she keeps. She's been fighting the good fight for songwriters, publishers, and music creators as the CEO of the Country Music Association. She has more than 29 years of experience in the television business, including 21 years producing or overseeing country music programming. Please make welcome Sarah Trahern.
Okay, let's see. How many CMA members do we have in the room tonight? So some of you guys, we have over 7,300 members around the country, and it is sure a pleasure of mine to get to serve you all year long. So we're going to talk a little bit about how I got here. I get asked a lot, how did you end up being the CEO of the CMA? And certainly it was not on my game plan when I was a child. Contrary to this picture. Who knew? But the theme that we started with tonight with the very first speaker had to do with passion. And whenever I speak to young people, the first thing I say is find a career that you're passionate about, because I truly believe your success follows. Business is not a 9-to-5 job. Certainly television and the music business are not 9-to-5 jobs. And if you're passionate about what you do, those 12, 13, 14-hour days are not going to feel as much like work. Most days I get up in the morning, almost every day when I get up in the morning, I cannot wait to get to work. And even those few days when I don't, there's something that pulls me through, and number one, that's passion, and I love what I get to do every day. Little did I know when I was a young kid, though, that that's what I would be doing. I thought my music passion was just going to be where it was. I was the product of a public school music education. I played violin and piano as a child. Today, the CMA Foundation gets to support music education efforts around the country. I was just up in Washington, D.C., meeting with Congress about how important music education is alongside a traditional education. So, thank you. Since 2006, we've actually given over $13 million to music education around the country, and the reason we get to do it is because of our national music community. For Music Fest, we have over 600 artists participate at Music Fest this past year, and they all play for free. And then we're able to turn over a majority of our proceeds to our foundation to give so that there could be a new generation of musicians down the road, and I'm very proud of that. After a traditional music career, I grew up in a family where my mom was a classical viola player, professional classical viola player, and my dad's a college professor, and he grew up sneaking a radio under the covers to listen to the Grand Ole Opry. When I was a kid, rather than traditional nursery songs and lullabies, he sang me Merle Haggard and George Jones. Some of those were not really appropriate childhood songs, like In the Jailhouse Now and Okie from Muskogee, but it kind of created a monster. So when I was 13, I moved from Illinois to Knoxville, Tennessee, and any of you who are women know what it's like to be a 13-year-old girl. And I made my parents' life miserable. How dare you take me away from all my friends and move me somewhere just because you think you've got a better job? And I really did make their life miserable. And so one night, to kind of celebrate and hang out, my father took me to a show in a parking lot, which was a group called the Knoxville Grass and the Osborne Brothers. I guess I should back up and say, when I was growing up, my mother didn't really love my dad's choice in country and bluegrass music, and so starting when I was about 3 years old, he would put me in the car and drag me to bluegrass music festivals with him around the country. So when I was 6 years old, we were at Bill Monroe's Bluegrass Festival the year that Nitty Gritty Dirt Band was there, right when they came out with the Circle album. I went, he made me go get autographs because he thought they'd give them to a 6-year-old girl rather than a 35-year-old man. So Marty Stewart was playing with Lester Flatt at the time. It's kind of ironic, years later my husband is actually a Flatt. So he would drag me around and do all that. So he took me to see the Osborne Brothers and the Knoxville Grass, and I looked up at the banjo player and I'm like, I think I want to do that. And so what was a bad experience, my move, really got transformed by spending my high school years learning to play the banjo. When I went to college at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., my college roommate was from New York. And the first letter I got from her, because this is back before the internet, guys, she sent me this long note and said, I live in New York, I like to shop, I da-da-da-da-da. What do you do? Well, I live in Nashville and I play the banjo, or Knoxville and I play the banjo. So I went to college. I had Bela Fleck on my wall. She had Boy George on her wall. Enough said. But that is actually me playing the banjo at my 21st birthday. Then, out of D.C., follow your passion. I went to D.C. knowing that I was going to want to go into journalism and cover politics. So after a couple things, I did some work on Capitol Hill for a stringer service. I worked for a political ad agency. In 1987, I went to work for C-SPAN, the Public Affairs Network. And I worked at C-SPAN from 1987 to 1995. I got to cover 2 presidential campaigns. I covered the 88, 92 campaigns. In 92, I spent almost 35 weeks on the road covering the campaign. So I get a little bit of a taste what it's like to be in a band. And I had a great run. I became a manager when I was 25. Never really had any management experience, so when I had 2 employees who shared an office who hated each other, I'm like, no boss to ask, hey, how do I really help deal with this? I thought, what experience do I have in my background? I was an RA in college. This is just like a roommate conflict, except they don't have to sleep together. So, worked through that. I really found that my passion in business was in leading people and putting together teams, and I had a great run at C-SPAN. Produced award-winning shows, a program called Book Notes. For those of you who are young, that's President Nixon. Oh, yeah. And so during that time, we did everything. We had played this game at the office where we talk about, what person has 55 cousins, or who played Tom Sawyer in their high school play. My sentence is always, who talked baseball with Richard Nixon, who smoked a cigar with Bill Clinton, and that was me. So very different than my world here in Nashville today. I had a great run at C-SPAN. I went back at Christmas time this past year, and over 40% of the people I worked with back then are still there. And it was great. It was Old Home Week for me, but I really needed to leave to grow. The people who were in the positions ahead of me then are still in those positions today. And for me, I was really ready for some more opportunities and stretch my wings. So I interviewed to be a producer at Nightline when Ted Koppel was on the show. And it came down to 3 of us. And I thought, man, if I get this job, it's great. It's Nightline. I mean, it's the big show in news. But it's also a 24-hour-a-day show. 6:30 in the morning, you get up, read all the newspapers. There's a conference call at 9, what's going to be on the show. Show's live at 11:30 at night. Go off at midnight. I'm like, man, I'm passionate about this, but I'm not that passionate about it. Thankfully, I didn't get the job, and it really forced me to think about what do I want my life to look like. And I lived in D.C. for quite a while, and I had a big passion for Nashville. My grandparents were here. My dad went to Vanderbilt. I had all these cousins who were in Nashville about my age who were starting to have kids. I had these crazy music friends I met at the Birchmere in D.C., and they all lived in Nashville. I'm like, if it takes me 3 months or 3 years, I'm going to pack it up and move to Nashville. So I started looking for jobs. I had an offer at the First Amendment Center. Didn't really want to take it at the time, though I ended up working for them later. And this job came open for manager of specials at TNN. And I'd applied for TNN for a couple of times and gotten the note from HR, thanks, but no thanks, we'll call you. So I got to move here. I've got to move fast. Is that my counting down time? Oh my gosh. So I got hired here at TNN based on my mindset. I had TV experience, but no experience in the music business. They totally took a flyer on hiring me, and it was the best thing in my life because it brought me to Nashville 21 years ago. So number 1, follow your passion. Number 2, jump off the deep end and take some chances. Sometimes you can play it too safe, take educated guesses, but you're never going to make such a mistake you can't pull yourself out of it. And so I always, when I hire people, try to find people who are passionate about what they do and really contribute. I got laid off. I stayed at TNN through CBS Cable and then VH1 and MTV. They offered me a job to go to New York with them to produce shows like Temptation Island, where they were hiring hookers to break up couples. I said, I work for C-SPAN, for God's sake. I mean, you can't get any more like Puritan than that. So I said, when you end up closing TNN, you can let me go too. And that unfortunately happened just a few months later. I got to do some really great things there, including working on a show called At the Ryman with Martin Fisher and High Five, who are here tonight. For a couple of years there, I did my own thing. I got to produce the Johnny Cash Memorial Service for CMT, which was one of the highlights of my career. Then I ended up at TNN, which was great, continuing to follow your passion. At Scripps, worked for Shop at Home, which was miserable, Great American Country. And we got to do my second most important show in my career, which was the Flood Telethon in 2010, where we got to raise about $2.5 million for Nashville. The last thing I'll leave you with: follow your passion, take chances, and the most important thing is remember it's a relationship-driven business. The reason I am where I am today is because all of those pivots added a skill set to where I am now. So we get to do 3 television shows today with ABC and get to push country music around the world through those television properties. But the most important thing of what I do is get to work with great people in a business. It's a small world, so you might win. I was head-to-head in a negotiation with an artist a few years ago, and the other person was able to offer this artist a little bit more money. But in the long run, the artist knew that I'd be there the next year to do something else with them, and that our relationship would be deeper than just this one show. So I think it's important, as you go through, you meet people tonight. The reason I ended up, when I left TNN, I'll tell one quick story and I'll get off the stage. When I left TNN, I was devastated. I made this huge move to Nashville, gave up my career in DC, moved to Nashville, threw myself into my job, and then got laid off. It's just the fact of the business today. A lot of consolidation. It happens to a lot of people. And one of my best friends said, I was going to the CMA Awards, ironically, that night. It was 2001. He said, you've got to take business cards. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to stay in Nashville. I don't know if I'm going to move somewhere. And he says, because you're going to run into people tonight at the CMAs who are going to want to know how to reach you now that you're not at TNN anymore. So this friend made me business cards, and I took them with me to the CMAs, and I gave out a couple. And a few months later, those are the people who called me for freelance projects, one of which is at the First Amendment Center. Then CMT called for something. Then Scripps called for something that I'd worked with. Those are all relationships that I had when I was on the network side, but they were good working relationship and friends relationships that led to work down the road. And in the long run, as I look around the room tonight when I walked in, I see so many friends from different chapters in those lives, and even though we may not get to work together still today, we're still really important in each other's lives. So remember, this is one of the things I think is so special about Nashville, is what a wonderful community we live in, and hopefully we don't take that for granted. Thank you.
How about that, folks? Inspired? I am. So listen, that wraps up our speaking portion of the night. I want to talk about a couple of things real quickly. First, again, thank you to all the speakers. They are why we are here. Let's give all of them another warm hand, please. Secondly, I want to thank again all of our sponsors whose marks have been scrolling up and down these killer boards for the last couple hours. I hope you'll do business with some of those folks. And lastly, I want to talk about the next Who Knew, which is October 7th. And I assure you, if you're a fan of what you saw tonight, you are going to have your mind blown, because we are going to do something that features one of my favorite bands of all time. And a lot of you in the room are young and may not know much about this band, but this is the band that changed my life and made me want to make my living in the music industry. And I can only tease some of the details, but I assure you that this is an event that you are not going to want to miss. And you should familiarize yourself with this record in particular between now and October 7th. That's all I have to say about that. Trust me. Caroline Glazer's going to come up and play a couple more songs for you. Then the Nick Moss Band is going to rock the house, and trust me, they're going to blow the roof off this place. So hang around, get a cocktail, tip your bartenders, and thank you very much for coming. We appreciate you.